Let's see. Let's
We
just
just lost you. We don't see you now.
Okay, just a sec. I've probably done something stupid. Got it. This meeting's being live streamed. There you are. I'm back. Well, I am literally just back from America. Let me start the show in the traditional manner. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, an assembled company, welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe this Friday night. That is, it's Louis' night. And so it's stories for children and Louis' mum, and Baba C, and Mike Faculty, and any of those people who refuse to grow up. So I've just come back from an amazing 10 days in Marrakesh, organizing organizing all the venues for the festival in February. And I have met amazing storytellers. And I was reminded of this story because on Wednesday night, I met an very old man called El Haj Ahmed. And he was the man responsible for reviving storytelling in Marrakesh. And we brought him down to the storytelling school, and all the young students paid homage to him. And the other master storytellers paid homage to him. And we've arranged him to be the guest of honor at the Storytelling Festival on the Friday night. But I was reminded that 5 years ago, I sat with Al-Haj in a corner of the Cafe Clock in Marrakesh. And he told me a story in Arabic. And Zuhair, young storyteller, translated it into English. And I told one of Duncan Williamson's stories to him. And Zuhair translated into Arabic. And we sat, two white-haired old men in the corner, swapping stories. And it is very important to me because a few months before that, I'd had a stroke, and that was the first time I'd told stories since my stroke. So, and when we met on Wednesday night, it was very emotional for both of us. But let us get to the story. So I thought tonight I would tell you the story that El Haj told me 5 years ago. And that story came from way back in time, a lot longer than 5 years ago. Probably when Baba C was growing that fantastic fabric, and actually they hadn't even invented the fabric that Baba C is wearing tonight. It was that long ago. And there was a king, and he loved stories. He loved stories. And he thought, well, I love stories so much, I'm going to invite all the storytellers round, and they can live here for free. And they can eat as much as they want, as long as they tell me stories. Now, that was a very dangerous thing to say, because anyone who's met storytellers says if they can come and live with you, one, you'll never get rid of them, because the idea of a free bed. And two, to say they could eat as much as they like, there would never be any food left for you. And you can imagine the king's horror when he sent down for his favorite sandwich. Louis, what was your favorite sandwich?
Chicken and bacon jam.
What was that? Say it again, Louis.
Bacon and jam. No, on my first time I had a sandwich, it was chicken and bacon. And then on my second one, on my sandwich, I had jam sandwich. So
You had a jam sandwich. Yeah, so he sent down, the king sent down for a bacon sandwich to be followed by a jam sandwich. He thought there's always a lot of bacon, there's always a lot of jam, there's always a lot of bread, and there's always a lot of butter. Do you think there was one loaf of bread left? No. Do you think there was one pot of jam left? No. Was there one rasher of bacon left? No. Was there even a little pat of butter left? Not one pat. Well, King thought, I can't just get rid of them because I invited them here in the first place. But I could set them an impossible task. And if they can't complete that task, whack, off with their heads. So he called all the storytellers in. He said, storytellers, you've given me a fine 2 days of stories, or 2 weeks of stories. It feels like 2 years of stories, you've eaten so much. But there's not one crumb of food left in my pantry. So I can't feed all of you. I can't even feed myself. But one of you can stay. Whoever can tell me a story without end. Well, the storytellers looked at each other and they thought, you know, it's a king. What we really need to know is what is the punishment if the story suddenly comes to an end. And the king said, I'm terribly sorry, chaps and chapesses, but it's only fair that should you start the task and fail, I chop off your head. Well, one by one, the storytellers left. And they sort of shook their heads. The sensible ones, Mike Faxey left. Even Baba C thought, I really like my head. And he said, it's okay. There'll be another day tomorrow. And there'll be another king who's got a good pantry. I think I'm going. But the young storytellers, well, they thought a lot of themselves. And one by one, they tried. They tried very hard, and some of them were very, very good. But not all bees can make honey. But one by one, they fell apart, and poor things, their heads were cut off and put on spikes round the walls of the city. Terrible. Till one day a storyteller turned up and he said, Your Majesty, I think I can do it. And the king said, well, you're a fine-looking young man, but if you can't, you know what'll happen. And the story said, yes, I know what'll happen. You're going to cut off my head and put it on a spike to join all those other heads up there. But I still want to try. Okay, said the king. It's your fault if you fail and I have to cut off your head. And the storyteller said, that's fine. A bargain is a bargain. And he started. Long, long, long ago, the king of the ants was marching with his ants, big army of ants, and it started raining. And the rain got heavier and heavier and heavier. And they spied a cave. And the king of the ants called all his huge army into the cave. It was dark. It was pitch black. But their eyes soon got used to the dark. And there in front of them was a huge mountain of wheat. And he called 4 of his strongest soldier ants. And he'd take 1 grain of wheat and move it back to the anthill. But it's raining, Your Majesty. I don't care. Take this. So 4 of them heaved 1 grain of wheat up. And the 5th one sort of put a leaf over them so they could be sheltered from the rain. And they started walking. Now they had many adventures on the way. There was a bird saw them and swooped down. They went and hid under a twig. Now, Louis, imagine you were an ant and you're carrying 4 ants and you're carrying a grain of wheat. What else could happen to you on the way? Oh, someone could come along, someone could walk along and squash you.
Yes, that's the accent.
And yeah, accidentally squash them. Well, they saw this big boot coming down the street. Boom, 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 boom. And just as it was about to squash them, they managed to move aside, and the big boot came down and missed them, but it stood in a big puddle, and the rain soaked them, and they floated down through the gutter, and oh my goodness gracious me, they went down a drain, but they still held on to the grain of wheat, and then they had to duck them. They had to duck a big bird that was coming down to pick to eat them or eat the grain of wheat. They weren't that sure if it was a vegetarian bird or not, and but eventually, and it took them not 1 day, not 2 days, not 3 days, not 5 days, not 4 days, but 5 days to get back to the anthill. And they were relieved, and they put that grain of wheat down, and they walked back to the king of the ants in the cave. And the king of the ants said, now take this 2nd grain of wheat and take it back to the anthill. Well, they had many adventures with that 2nd grain of wheat. Big boots that they moved out the way of, birds flying down, rainstorms, and all sorts of, and a cat chased them. But they eventually got back, not in 1 day, not in 2 days, not in 3 days, not in 4 days, but 5 days. It only took them 3 days to get back because they didn't have a grain of wheat to carry. When they got back, the king of the ants said, take this 3rd grain of wheat and take it back to the anthill. At this point, the king turned round to the storyteller and said, how long is it going to take to get through this mountain of wheat? About a year, Your Majesty. Well, come back to me in a year's time and continue the tale. Well, a year went by, and the storyteller came back to the palace. I've come back to carry on with the tale, Your Majesty. The last grain of wheat had been taken, and the soldier ants were back. And they were a bit further into the cave because the mountain of wheat had gone. But there, behind the mountain of wheat, was a mountain of rice. And the king of the ants turned around and said, take this 1 grain of rice and take it back to the anthill. And it took a few days, not 1 day, not 2 days, not 3 days, not 4 days, but 5 days for that grain of rice, and 3 days to come back. And oh my goodness, Well, by the third grain of rice, the king turned around to the storyteller and said, and how long will it take to get through this mountain of rice? About a year, Your Majesty. Well, come back in a year. Well, he came back in a year. And he said, he carried on, and the last grain of rice had gone, and behind the mountain of rice was a mountain of lentils. And the king said, hold on, hold on, hold on. Before you start, how long will this take you to get through? And the storyteller turned around to the king and said, well, before I tell you, if I don't finish it, I want to marry your daughter if I can continue with this story. And the king said, that's not fair. And the storyteller looked at the heads all round the square, all round the city walls. He said, do you think that's fair? And the king said, I suppose you've got a point there. Well, so he came back, he said, well, it'll take about a year to get through the lentils, but he did marry the king's daughter. And a year later, when he came back, they had a baby boy. And the storyteller came back and said, Your Majesty, it's time for me to carry on with the story. And the king said, I think it's entirely possible that you've won, because it would hardly do for me to cut off the head of my grandson's father. And so the storyteller and the king's daughter and the baby boy lived happily. And I mean, he did tell stories, much shorter stories, to the king every night. And they lived happily for the rest of their lives. And story ends.
Yay bo, yes, yes, whoop whoop.
So that was
like the butterflies on your mug. That story flew high above.
Yeah, I told a much shorter version of that, I think, on Sunday, but it's always fun to take to take that first journey of the ants and see what happens to them. Right, another story. I think I'll do one of my favorite stories about a girl called Hairy Ruchi. And she lived with her two sisters in the middle of a forest with their mother. And the two sisters were beautiful. But Ruchi was covered in hair from the top of her head to the bottom of her feet. And the two beautiful sisters turned around to Mum and said, Mum, you never say that. You don't say that to your mum, do you, Louis? Yeah, you know that whiny voice when you want something? Mum, could we have a good whiny mum off you, Louis?
Oh no. No, where's the breakfast?
That's what I'm talking about. Perfect. Well, but they were twice as whingy as you, Louis. And they said, Mum, give us a cake and we'll be off to give us that cake you're baking in the oven and we'll be off to seek our fortune, because we're never going to meet anyone in the middle of this forest. And Mum said, take half a cake and I wish you luck. I'll go with my blessing. Or take a whole cake and go without. And of course, they said, you know, these are two beautiful sisters and very selfish. Said, forget the blessing, Mum. We're hungry. Give us the whole cake. They took the whole cake and they set off down the road. Well, Hairy Ruchi, but that was the hairy one's name, turned around to their mum and said, look, my two sisters are beautiful, but they don't have a grain of sense between them. Give us half that griddle cake you're baking in the oven, and I'll be off to look after them. Well, of course, she was given the whole griddle cake, and she set off down the road, and she soon caught up with her sisters. And, you know, sometimes you'll be with people, and they're kind of embarrassing, and you wish they'd go away. Or worse still, you join people, and you realize they don't want you about, and you're trying to find a way to leave without looking stupid. And it was just like that with Hairy Roach and her two sisters. They thought, no one is going to speak to us with this hairy creature next to us. And there was nothing nice about the sisters. They just tied her up to a tree and set off down the road. That wasn't very nice, was it? Well, before they could blink, Hairy Roach is walking next to them again. This time, they dug a big hole. They put her in the bottom of the hole. They covered the hole with earth. They covered the earth with turf. And they set off down the road. Before they could blink, Hairy Ruchi is walking next to them. This time she's got clods of earth in her hair, worms crawling through it. Well, it's getting dark, thought the sisters. No, maybe no one will notice. And we haven't the faintest idea where we're going to stay tonight. Maybe she can find us somewhere. And the three girls walked together till they came to a big castle. And they knocked on the front door. Can I have a bit of knocking? And it creaked and it squeaked. Oh, fantastic. And there's to the great giant. Yes, girls? What do you want? Well, have you somewhere for me and my sisters to stay tonight, said their Ruchi. Well, as it happens, upstairs are my three daughters. You may share the bed with them. Thank you very much, Terry Ruchi. And she went upstairs with her two sisters. But before she went to sleep, she took the diamond necklaces off the giant's daughter's necks and put them on her and her sister's necks. She took the hair necklaces off her and her sister's necks. She put them on the giant's daughter's necks. Well, in the middle of the night, the giant turned around to his wife and said, those three guests will make fine meat pies. Mind you, we're going to singe that hairy one first. So let's run upstairs and chop off their heads. Well, it's dark, said the servant. How will I know who's who? Easy, said the giant. My daughters have diamond necklaces. Our guests have hair necklaces. Well, you can imagine the giant's surprise when he saw who came down the stairs next day, thanked him kindly for his hospitality, and set off down the road. Well, they'd hardly gone down the road when the giant realized what had happened, and he was furious. He started chasing after Hairy Rochi. The two sisters screamed. Hairy Rochi picked up a sister under each arm, and this is absolutely true. Call me a storyteller if I lie, but she was running so fast there were sparks coming off her feet and hitting the giant in the face. And they ran until they came to the river. And they're across the river in one bound and in the land of the King of Spain. When shall I see you again, said the giant. When I have business with you, said Hairy Rochi. The three girls carried on together till they came to the palace of the King of Spain himself. Oh. Well, the King of Spain, he had three sons. And the eldest sister, she fell in love with the eldest son. He fell in love with her. The second sister, she fell in love with the second son. He fell in love with her. Hairy Rochi, she fell in love with the youngest son. He wasn't so sure. But the next day, the king said, it's a fine thing you did for your oldest sister. Now, if I should happen to have the golden talking quilt that sits on the giant's bed, your eldest sister could marry my eldest son. Well, here Ruchi's back at the giant's castle, and she's in the middle of the night, and she's tugging away at the talking golden quilt. Who's pulling me, said the quilt. It's myself, said Ruchi. What's all that noise, said the giant. Someone's pulling me off, said the quilt. Who's pulling me off, said the giant. It's myself, said the quilt. If myself doesn't be quiet, myself be put in the fire. The quilt couldn't say a thing. Ruchi grabbed the quilt, started running towards the river. When the giant realized what had happened, he was furious. He started chasing after Ruchi. When he was on the hilltop, she was in the valley, and when she was on the hilltop, he was in the valley, and they ran till they came to the river. And she was across the river in one bound and in the land of the King of Spain. When shall I see you again, said the giant. When I have business with you. Well, Ruchi carried on to the King of Spain. She gave the King of Spain the talking golden quilt. He's very impressed. And the eldest sister married the eldest son. And at the wedding banquet, no one took much notice about Ruchi apart from the old traveling woman that occasionally visited her in her cottage. And when the wedding was over, the king said, it's a fine thing you did for your oldest sister. Now, if I should happen to have in my possession the sword of light that hangs over the giant's bed, your second sister could marry my second son. Well, Ruchi's back at the castle. She's hiding up the chimney, and the giant's wife is cooking a great cauldron of porridge on the fire. And Ruchi grabs a sack of salt and pours the whole sack of salt into the porridge and stirs it up. And when the porridge was ready, it was set in front of the giant, and he had it all up. He didn't mind it being salty. But in the middle of the night, Louis just going swimming, I think. You going swimming, Louis?
Yes, I am.
Well, are you going to listen in the car?
Yeah. Yes, I am. And you can't see me because it's dark.
Yeah, but that's okay. We know you're there, Louis. We know you're there. Have a great swim, won't you?
Carry on the stories.
I'm going to carry on with the story. And what would happen? The giant had just ate all the salty porridge. And he'd gone to sleep, and in the middle of the night, he woke up. He was really thirsty. And he said, servant, servant, go to the well and draw me the biggest bucket of water you can find. And the servant went out. And there Ruchi's hiding behind a wall, which gets a handful of dust and throws it in the servant's face. Just servant runs back to the giant and said, giant, it's so dark out there. There's hailstones coming out the sky the size of frogs and hit me in the face. Oh, stop whinging, said the giant. Here, take the sword of light and use it as a torch to find your way to the well. Well, the servant went out. He found his way to the well, and he laid the sword of light down next to the well, and he let down the bucket. And he's just pulling up the bucket full of water when he reached round, grabbed the sword of light, grabbed the servant by the hair and said, back to the castle with you, or your head will be parting company with your body. He didn't need telling twice. Well, when the giant realized what happened, he was furious. He started running after Ruchi, and there was all that business with hills and valleys, and they ran till they came to the river, and they crossed the river in one bound, and in the land of the King of Spain. When shall I see you again, said the giant. When I have business with you, said Ruchi. Well, the King of Spain was given the sword of light, and again, the second sister married. Well, for the first time, actually, the second sister married the second son. And when the wedding was over, the King of Spain turned around to Ruchi and said, it's a fine thing you did for your second sister. Now, if I should happen to have in my possession the golden bells hanging round the neck of the giant's pacorn, a baby billy goat, you could marry my youngest son. I'm not sure your youngest son wants to marry me, said Ruchi. Anyone who can be that kind to their sisters I want to marry, said the youngest son. Well, if you think she got back to the castle fast the first 2 times, she was fast to this. And she was trying to lead out that baby billy goat from the shed without the bells ringing. And she spied an elder tree, and she broke down a branch from the elder tree, and she took the soft metal and she put it in the bells. The bells couldn't ring, and she led that baby billy goat across the cobbled road, the cobbled yard. And when they got to the center, everything fell out of the bells, and the bells started ringing, and out came the giant, and he grabbed. Now I have you, he said. And if you were me, what would you do? Well, if I was you, I'd put me in a sack, and I'd hang that sack from the rafters. I'd leave my servants I'd leave my wife guarding the sack, and I would go out my servants. I would cut big clubs from the forest, big sticks from the forest, and I would come back, and I would beat me till I was cut and bruised all over. That is what I'll do, said the giant. And he dropped her in the sack, and he hung the sack from the rafters from the ceiling. And he left his wife guarding the sack, and he went out with his servant to cut big sticks from the forest to beat her with. As soon as he was out the door, Ruchi started laughing and whistling and singing. Giant's wife did so. I said, you're crazy. You're laughing and you're whistling and you're singing, and you're going to be beaten till you're cut and bruised all over. Well, you're in this. If you were in the sack, you'd be laughing and whistling too. For in this sack are diamonds and rubies such as you have never seen. I don't believe you, said the giant's wife. Oh, please yourself, said Ruchi. All right, let me have a look. Oh, no, you'll only want some. Oh, please let me have a look. All right, let me down. Promise you'll be quick. Well, the giant's wife let Ruchi out. Down. Ruchi got out the sack. Giant's wife got in. As soon as the giant's wife was in the sack, Ruchi pulled the sack up and left it hanging from the ceiling. Started running towards the river. When the giant came in with the servant, he started beating the sack. Ooh ah! Sounds like your wife, said the servant. Don't be daft, said the giant. Ooh ah! He looked down. He saw the empty chair. He thought, I'm in a bit of trouble now. Well, he ran 10 times around that castle before he got to the front door in front of his wife. And he ran just in time to see Ruchi leaping over the river in one bound and in the land of the King of Spain. How shall I catch you now, said the giant. Well, I suggest, said Ruchi, you get on your hands and knees and you drink the river dry. I don't know if he's still there, but he was last time. Sorry. But back at the castle, there was to be one last wedding. And Ruchi just had one request, that she should travel in a separate carriage with the old traveling woman. So the old traveling woman and Ruchi set off in one carriage to the church, and the king and his youngest son set off in another. And when they got to the church, her door was open, and there was no traveling woman. And instead of Ruchi, there was the most beautiful girl you've ever seen in all of your life, with the same eyes as Ruchi. When she was asked her story, apparently when she was just a babe, a spell had been put upon her that had covered her in hair. And the only way that spell could be broken was if someone agreed to marry her exactly as she was. And that the youngest son had agreed to do. Well, as for the old traveling woman, she was a guardian angel and no longer needed. And of those 3 marriages, 2 were happy. No. 1 was happy and 2 were not. And I'll leave you to guess which was which. And that was a story that was collected by a bookshop owner in Dublin at the end of the 19th century called Kennedy. For the folklorists out there, I'm just going to have a sip of my coffee. And then I'm going to finish with a story about an old woman who lived in a vinegar bottle. One day, flying overhead was a fairy, and this is what the fairy heard. Woe is me! Woe is me! An old woman such as me shouldn't live in a vinegar bottle. She should live in a fine cottage with a thatched roof. And There should be roses growing around the front door. Okay, said the fairy. Before you get into bed tonight, turn round 3 times, and in the morning, you shall see what you shall see. Well, the old woman didn't even say thank you, just ran to her bed, turned around 3 times, got into bed, went to sleep. When she woke up, she was in a fine cottage in the country, and there was a thatched roof and roses growing around the front door, and the fairy went all around the world and did all those things that fairies have to do. And after a year, she decided to see how the old woman was getting on, and to her surprise, this is what she heard. Woe is me! Woe is me! An old woman such me shouldn't live out in the middle of nowhere. She should live in a fine townhouse in Washington, D.C., and there should be chandeliers hanging down from the ceiling. And there should be people outside singing and dancing. All right. Before you go into bed tonight, turn round 3 times, and in the morning we shall see what we shall see. But the old woman didn't even say thank you. She just ran to her bed, turned around 3 times, got into bed, went to sleep. When she woke up in the morning, she was in a fine townhouse in Washington, D.C. And there were chandeliers coming down, and there were servants at the door, and people came and left their calling cards and went away, and there were people singing, dancing on the street outside. And the fairy went all around the world, did all those things that fairies have to do. And after a year, she decided to see how the old woman was getting on. And to her surprise, but not yours, especially not Baba C's, or Mike Paxton, or even Louis. This is what she heard. Woe is me, an old woman such as me shouldn't live in a townhouse in this terrible city. Well, she should live in a fine castle, and there should be servants bringing her breakfast in bed. And the queen should come to visit, and she should curtsy to the queen. All right. Before you get into bed tonight, turn around 3 times. In the morning, we shall see what we shall see. And the old woman didn't even say thank you. Just went to her bed, turned around 3 times, got into bed and went to sleep. And when she woke up in the morning, she was in a fine castle, and there were servants bringing her breakfast in bed. Now, if I was in a class full of children, I would ask them what they wanted for breakfast, and they'd tell me cornflakes and Cocoa Pops and all that sort of thing. Louis, can you unmute and tell me what you like for breakfast? Or is it difficult for you to unmute in the car?
Pardon, John?
What is your favorite breakfast?
Oh my goodness, this is so favorite.
Do you like bacon? Shall I just invent but you're breaking up a bit, Louis. I'll invent a breakfast for you. Bacon. Sausage. Pancakes.
Yes.
You want pancakes with syrup on?
I'm not saying this. No pancakes.
No pancakes.
Full English breakfast.
Oh, you want a full English? Right. A full English. Bacon, eggs, sausage, baked beans, a bit hash brown because a little bit of USA crept in somewhere. You now get a hash brown with your full English. A bit of black pudding and what else can we put? Well, tomatoes. You need some tomatoes if you're having a full English, don't you? And some mushrooms. And there was a huge full English, and then there was coffee, and there was tea, and there was milk, and there was orange juice, and she ate it all up and waddled down the stairs. And there was the Queen, and she curtsied to the Queen. And the fairy went all around the world, did all those things the fairies have to do, and after a year, she decided to see how the old woman was getting on, and to her surprise, but not yours, this is what she heard. Woe is me, an old woman such as me should not have to curtsy to the Queen, she should be the Queen. All right. Before you get into bed tonight, turn around 3 times. And in the morning we shall see what we shall see. And the old woman didn't even say thank you. She just got the servants to carry her up the stairs, spin her around 3 times, and lift her into bed. When she woke up in the morning, she was the queen. And the fairy went all around the world, did all those things the fairies have to do, and after a year, she decided to see how the old woman was getting on, and to her surprise. But no one else here, out in virtual land, listening on Facebook or Vimeo or YouTube or whatever you're looking at, or live or live on Zoom as Louis and Baba C and everyone else is. You're not surprised at all. But the fairy was, because this is what she heard. Woe is me, an old woman such as me shouldn't be queen of a tiny little country like this. She should be queen of the whole world. I know, Baba C. You wouldn't believe it, would you? Okay, said the fairy, before you get into bed tonight, turn around 3 times. In the morning, we shall see what we shall see. The old woman didn't even say thank you. She just ran up to her bed. Well, actually, she got the servants to carry her up there. The servants turned down her silk sheet, spun her around 3 times and lifted her into bed, and she went to sleep. And when she woke up in the morning, she was back in her vinegar bottle. Now, I always think the moral of that story is always cut your losses at breakfast in bed. But some people might say there was a very important word she forgot to say. Thank you. And she was just a tad on the greedy side. Well, I've had a really good time tonight. I was very worried because I'd left my webcam in Morocco and I was tired having come off the plane and I couldn't get a taxi when I got up at the station. So I walked home and I thought, am I going to be able to do this? But it's been loads of fun. Thank you, Louis. And I think this Sunday we've got Baba C. No, we haven't got Baba C. This Sunday, we've got Mike Rust. I've got Baba C's on everywhere. Well, but Baba C probably will be there because he always comes. But Mike Rust is doing our worldwide story round, 6 o'clock. Everyone's welcome to come and tell a story. Tuesday is our fantastic young tellers. Next Friday will be Dawn Ellis. Harley doesn't know that yet, but I will tell him. And so on and so forth as we continue through this merry way through Christmas to February to the most magnificent storytelling festival there's ever been in the whole history of storytelling festival. But for now, good night and thank you very much for listening.
Hey, John Rowe.
Mm-hmm.
It's Thanksgiving. It's Thanksgiving in America, I think this Thursday coming up. I may be recovering from, what do they call it? The itis. I may have eaten too much and had too many adult beverages.
Well,
so I may not be here next Friday.
Okay, so well, you've got parole, and and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Happy Turkey Day.
And for the vegetarians, we can gobble. Wait a minute, I have to rephrase that. We can enjoy meals as well.
Yes.
I wanted to say we could gobble up other things, but that didn't sound right.
No, nut roast. I recommend a good nut roast.
Not touching that. Nope.
Oh, nuts are not good for you.
Mashed potato and sweet potato with cabbage and cauliflower.
That sounds good. Yeah,
it was good.
Sounds good. Yeah.
It's that good.
All right, I was wondering what that was. You got me hungry.
Well, right. Okay. Well, so we'll expect everyone to come back next Friday or the Friday after with a recipe. Friday after is Donald Nelson again, so we can interrupt him with recipes. Okay. Because he's a friend of mine. Okay.
Everyone's
night, Louis. Night, everyone. Night, Mike.
Enjoy your swim, Louis.
Thank you, Ali, for flying the magic carpet.
John Rowe,
Bye.
I think this was your best storytelling yet. I was thoroughly entranced, and I'm becoming an even bigger fan of John Rowe. So thank you,
Oh,
sir.
stop it. Mom.
I'm humbled. I'm humbled. Right. Thank
But
you.
no
Bye,
poems.
everyone.
No poems. That's the only disappointment.
Oh,
Great
sorry.
stories, but
I
no
had thought
poem.
about it, but I didn't have anything to hand, and I thought I wouldn't do the monster poem again because I always do it.
Louis
But
heard it.
I
I
know.
I know I know you like it, Mike, and I apologize. Okay, bye.
Everyone take care. Thanks, Ali. As always, you drove or you flew the magic carpet exceptionally well. Louis, enjoy your swim.
I will, Baba C. Are you
Right.
in next Friday?
I may not be in next Friday because we have Thanksgiving on next Thursday, and I may be recovering from eating so much. But I will do my best. So if you see me, if I'm on next Friday and you can't see my face, it's because I'm still recovering.
Okay.
Because
Actually, I'm sorry to interrupt.
no,
but-
I'm from a family of people that love to cook. So we eat a lot, and we get what we call the itis, which is what you get after eating a lot. It means we like to sleep a lot. It's going to be fun.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
And how many people are there?
Well, it depends, because even though our family's in a tight bubble, we have family in different states. So it probably is going to be just the people in my sister's home. But no matter whether we have 4 or whether we have 40, we're going to celebrate and we're going to eat and we're going to enjoy. And between your mom and I, there might be adult beverages served.
Enjoy.
Oh, yes. That's why I may not be here next Friday. No, I drink responsibly. All right, everybody. I think Ali needs to do other things. But Louis, you're one of my favorite people. I think of you as a nephew.
I think I decided on the chat.
Say that again.
I saw on chat.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right. I'm glad. So until then, swim magnificently, read joyfully, and most of all, be Louis. I'll talk to you then.
Maybe I'll see you next Friday. I think I don't know. So,
All right.
No,
Good night. Oh, good afternoon for my part.
In me, BBC One, 7 a.m. 7 p.m.
All right.
All right. And until then, good children in need. Happy Thanksgiving and goodbye. And happy Christmas.
All right.
And happy birthday.
Until the next time, to be continued.